It started with a dream, a boy who came of age in a time when nothing was promised. Not to the gifted, not to the talented, not even to the ones who gave everything they had. There were obstacles set in front of men like him, mines laid along the path, and still he became a man. He earned a top-tier education in spite of every trap set for him. He dodged the bullets meant to stop him, the metaphorical ones and the real ones. And he rose where so many young black men like him were never given the chance. He delivered babies for 40 years, tens of thousands of them. He rose to become the chairman of his hospital's Department of Obstetrics. He took an oath, and for 4 decades he kept it. And then the state of Maryland decided he would never practice medicine again. Not in Maryland, not anywhere in this country, for the rest of his life. Railroaded, the Tulsafication of Dr. Harold O. Alexander. This is the story of a black physician, a women's doctor, a provider of last resort, who was not destroyed because he was the worst doctor in Maryland. He was destroyed because he was the easiest to reach. I am Dr. Harvey Jenkins, MD, PhD, retired orthopedic spine surgeon, pain management physician, and biochemist. And this is Railroaded, the story of Dr. Harold O. Alexander. Harold Oliver Alexander was born in Washington, D.C. He came up through the district's public schools and graduated from Ballou Senior High in 1970. From there, the Ivy League, Princeton, where admission for a young man like him was almost unheard of. Then Howard, where he earned his medical degree at the age of 24. He served his country as a captain in the United States Air Force Medical Corps. He came home, entered private practice, and in 1986 became board certified in obstetrics and gynecology, the mark of the highest clinical and surgical skill his field can confer. He rose to vice chairman and then chairman of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Prince George's General Hospital. You do not chair a hospital's Department of Obstetrics by being incompetent. He built his life's work around the patients other doctors found complicated or inconvenient or politically radioactive. Women, often at the most vulnerable moments of their lives. He guarded their safety, their spirit, and their privacy. He called himself a provider of last resort. For a population he believed the system had always undervalued. That is who they came for. Because Dr. Alexander performed abortions, legal ones. And in America, that did not make him a metaphor. It made him a target. He practiced in the shadow of men who had been murdered for the same work. Shot in their clinics, in their churches, in their own kitchens. That was the world he worked in. One national anti-abortion organization, Operation Rescue, would later take public credit for the campaign against him. In their own words, his case represented over 2.5 years of work by our investigative staff. They gathered documentation. They handed it to activists. They pressed it into the hands of the authorities. And when his license was restricted, they celebrated the result as a major victory. By his account, the threats followed him home. It is why, to this day, you will not find Harold Alexander on social media. A man accused in public has chosen silence in public because the last time his name traveled, it came back to him as a threat on his life and on the lives of his family. The case that ended his career began with a wanted pregnancy. A woman, nearly 7 months along, carrying a child with catastrophic, life-limiting malformations. She came to Dr. Alexander for help. By the time she reached his office, he examined her and found what no one wanted to find. There was no heartbeat. He documented it himself. The child was already gone. What he did next is what the doctor and the state would spend years fighting over. The Maryland Board of Physicians concluded that he had used poor judgment, that a case like this belonged in a hospital, not an office. But the physicians the board leaned on to reach that conclusion had never performed the procedure they were sitting in judgment of. The specialist who testified for Dr. Alexander had. A director of second trimester services. She told the hearing under oath that his clinical judgment met the standard of care. And in this case, the one they revoked him for, there was no injured patient. No complaint from the woman he treated. She was cared for. She went home. Harold Alexander was not flawless. No physician is, and this film will not pretend that he was. He had been disciplined before, and he answered for it. He does not claim a clean record. He claims something narrower and harder to dismiss, that the punishment did not fit the man. An investigative journalist, Angela Green, has documented dozens of cases like his. In a book called Legalized Extortion, fewer than 5% of America's physicians are black. Hundreds are pushed out of practice every year. The advocates around Dr. Alexander have a name for the pattern. Regulatory racism, economic lynching, Tulsafication, the burning down of black achievement because it succeeded in a country that has rarely forgiven black success. So what did it cost? His license, revoked in 2016. His petition to return denied. In his 70s, still sharp, still full of energy, he is permanently barred from the only work he ever trained to do. Dr. Alexander has a phrase for what was done to him. He calls it the decapitation of intergenerational wealth. 48 years of skill, a practice, a livelihood, a name, severed in a single order. And it does not stop with him. When you remove a black physician from a community that trusted him, that community does not receive an identical replacement. The research is clear that patients often do better with doctors who share their background, what he calls race-concurrent care. His patients did not simply lose a doctor, they lost their doctor. And here is the asymmetry that should trouble you. Dr. Alexander lost everything. The organization that ran the years-long campaign to end his career celebrated when it worked, and answered for nothing. And the threats against his life, the exposure of his home, the wanted posters that went up in his own neighborhood branding him a monster. No one answered for those either. No symmetry, no accountability, no justice, just ruin. For a physician like Harold Alexander, true vindication was never on the menu. The process itself was the punishment, and it was never really about safety. This is not, in the end, a story about whether one doctor got every call right. It is a story about who is easy to destroy. They believe that doing the work honestly will protect them. It doesn't. Abortion providers don't shoot back. They keep careful records. They answer every subpoena. And when the target is black and independent and already standing alone, the pattern stops looking like coincidence. This does not get fixed with outrage. It gets fixed with policy, with oversight of who gets targeted, with real accountability. When the state destroys a career it can never give back. And with education, so the next community can tell the difference between a doctor who was dangerous and a doctor who was simply reachable. Dr. Alexander is fond of a line from Dr. King, that in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Learn his name, Harold O. Alexander, M.D. So what does it all say? He dreamed. He dreamed big. He fought obstacles his whole life against a culture that was openly hostile to him and to people like him. And he fought with honor, with intellectual distinction, to build a legacy and to light a path for those who might one day follow, only to watch that work dishonored and rebranded in the ugliest terms, only to end up worse off than if he had never dreamed at all. Learn his name and refuse to let his story be told, only in the voice of the people who ended his career. Stay curious, stay informed,